the last week in March, and it gives us a chance to come out and look how the forest garden is waking up, not even waking up yet, but just making some observations about the trees I'm going to be coming back in here and getting signwood from, and perhaps doing some pruning. And here's a good example of a tree that's never been pruned, and I call it a red baron. I haven't really found out what the variety is, but it's an extremely good winter apple. And I let it grow sort of multi-trunked here, just from an observation I made. And most seedling trees along roadsides will take this form. I think it's a survival instinct of the tree, so that if one of the branches gets girdled, then there'll be something else to take its place. But this whole section here, and I think what we do is when we put signwood on dwarfing rootstocks and prune the hell out of trees, we don't honor the intelligence of the tree. And I think that's what Fukuoka was trying to get at, is that the tree has its own intelligence. And as man, as our ego wants to be in control of everything, so we want to manipulate to the point of absurdity. But here's a good example of how things can kind of go on their own. And this whole region and the whole area here below the pond was nothing but a ravine, a deep ravine, where we threw snags and stumps and boards and debris for years, and then finally brought in some topsoil, not topsoil, but subsoil, from the excavation over there by the core greenhouse. All that red clay was just put here, maybe a foot on top of all the snags, and then gradually filled it in with sheet mulch and some minor terraces, grew annuals for a few years, and then here's a nice young pear tree that hasn't been pruned yet. And the whole idea was not to do any major pruning in here, to see how the trees, when they're on full-size rootstocks, they will tend to take a shape of their own and using their own intelligence instead of intervening all the time. And Mama Cat has just found a bit of catnip there, and she's wallowing in the high of the morning here. She did her sun salutations in the chair, and now she's out with me on the walk, and she can really enjoy the herb that grows in here for them to have a good time. Here's another pear tree, which has not been pruned, has a nice shape. There's another apricot tree that is struggling a bit. It'll take its own time. And here's a cherry tree, a sweet cherry tree, one of a few that I've been getting established. They'll take some time. But this was a Hugelkultur experiment that began 20 years ago or 40 years ago, when I started filling in this ravine with snags and slug stumps and old boards, twisted boards that we couldn't use. And that was before we even knew what Hugelkultur was. So we were practicing it sort of consciously. And eventually we are using this unusable space. These are some terraces that we still grow annuals on. That you can see there are a few. There's an apricot ceiling up there that I never did anything with, and It could be a practice tree to hold a lot of heirloom apricots, a gene pool, for to say. And there's a volunteer Manitou maple that we use for coppicing. And there's my giant lamb's quarters, where we've gotten a bushel or two of seed from, and this stalks will all go back into the soil as organic matter. And you can see this is just moving with worms right here. And it still freezes every night, but the worms are right up on the surface here, breaking down any organic matter that we've piled up here, constantly throwing leaves down and other material. There's a chestnut tree that we put in last year, and these are all young lamb's quarters. You can see the seed here, and then these are all coming up. This will be our early salad greens. Gooseberries. And this is an Antonocta apple that has 10 varieties grafted onto it. And it has a pretty good shape. It's a full-size tree and a good apple, and we use it as a practice tree. You can see a couple of dangling grafts right here. These are heirlooms. So when I find an heirloom and I don't have, well, I always try to put it on a tree here so that we have a couple ways of saving it. Either put it on a rootstock, but also put it on a tree. So I can come back in here and grab a piece of sign wood